Hey, Slater Crusaders. America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk a lot about Afghanistan for almost all the show today. A couple points here. First, this never would have happened if Trump were president, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows that's true. John McGuirk, he's an Irish writer. He said, the fall of Afghanistan is precisely the kind of foreign policy catastrophe that really smart people used to worry would happen under Donald Trump, but never did. And it's precisely the kind of thing that the smart people, like Biden, were supposed to prevent from ever happening. And I think we can all imagine what would happen right now if Trump were president and this happened. It wouldn't, but if it did, holy cow, you can imagine the left absolutely freaking out. But this is 100 times worse than anything that ever happened under Trump's administration, there's no question. And he ended with this. He said, one of the regular knocks on Trump was that he did not listen to the advice of foreign policy experts, and he did not trust his own intelligence service and their reports. Well, Biden does. This never would have happened under Trump, and everyone knows it. Remember when some terrorists killed a contractor at the Baghdad embassy? This was December 31st, 2019, and it went until the next day, January 1st, 2021. 2 days later, less than 48 hours later, the president ordered a bomb to be dropped from a drone and killed the top Iranian general Soleimani. And here we have some pictures with the aftermath of that decision. Trump tweeted out a picture of the American flag. And people said, what happened? And then he explained. At a Trump rally, he said, we stopped him quickly, we stopped him cold. And here's what he said on Twitter. This was a couple months before, setting the stage, what was to come. Biden's never talked like this. To the Iranian president, never ever threaten the United States again, or you will suffer consequences the likes of which few throughout history have ever suffered before. We're no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. By the way, Trump, of course, not allowed on Twitter anymore. He was very mean. So mean. My children were watching. He was so mean, and my children were watching. So he's not allowed on Twitter anymore. But the Taliban is. The Taliban and their spokesperson is allowed on. They're allowed on Twitter. This never would have happened under Trump. And everyone knows it. Yesterday, we talked to Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. He was the National Security Advisor for Pence for, I think, the entire 4 years. Here's what he said about Trump yesterday.
President Trump picked up the phone and called Mullah Baradar, who was the chief negotiator for the Taliban, not once but twice in the Oval Office. And he was very clear in Trumpian terms of what would happen if he screwed around with the United States, or what happened or he didn't fulfill it. And he got it.
What did he say?
I'm sorry?
What did he say?
He basically said, again, in Trumpian terms, that if Baradar harmed an American or something went bad, that he knew where he lived, he knew where his family lived, he knew where all his buddies lived, and we were coming to get him. And we proved that with Soleimani, and we proved that with Baghdadi, and he got it. I mean, he really did get it. Baradar owed us a little bit, too. We got Baradar out of a Pakistani jail to make sure he could do the negotiations for the Taliban going forward. But the president was really quite clear. And that's your big difference.
This never would have happened under Trump, and the Taliban knows it too. Now you compare that with the State Department today saying that the Taliban needs to have an inclusive government that involves women. You kidding me? Listen to these people just constantly lie to us like we're a bunch of idiots. This is the National Security Advisor. So that was the former National Security Advisor for Pence. Here's the current National Security Advisor.
There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan.
And yet that is precisely what we have seen over these last few days. How do you explain getting this so wrong? Well, first, Savannah, to be fair, the helicopter has been the mode of transport from our embassy to the airport for the last 20 years.
But you know the larger point. It's not the helicopter. It's not the mechanism. No, it's the last-minute scramble. You know that. It's the last-minute scramble when the assurances from the president himself were this was not what we were going to see.
Good for Savannah. I'm going to be curious to see how she and other in the media act now that a day has gone by and they've gotten their marching orders and they've gotten the talking points, and how much they fall in line with the talking points as opposed to their initial reactions, which were correct. So here you have the National Security Advisor squabbling over the means of leaving. Savannah rightfully calling them out. Good for her. It's not the way they left. It's the desperate scramble. Nice try. So that's my first point here, is that Trump never would have let this happen, and everyone knows it. And I hope everyone who didn't vote for Trump because his tweets were mean never forgets this. Second point, and I know we've all seen this, but I really want this to sink in, because we have no place in our brain for it. We have no place in our brain for some of these things we've seen. We've all had a bad airport experience, right? I know you've been to an airport and the planes are delayed. Maybe there's a big snowstorm, right? You flew through Chicago and the big snowstorm. So all the planes are delayed. And no one's getting on a plane. So you're not going to be able to get home tonight. And then you wait in line, this huge line, everyone's miserable, you wait in line, you finally get to the end and they're like, hey, and they're like, oh, no, sorry, no, we can do, sir, click. And like, can I at least have a food voucher? And they're like, oh, sorry, no food vouchers on if it's a weather delay. And you're like, what are you talking? I need some food. So like, okay, they give you $10, but it's, midnight. So the only place open is the pretzel place, right? So you go get a stale pretzel. And you're like, do I even go to a hotel? Like my next flight is at 7 a.m. Do I gotta go? Is it even worth going? So you're like, I might as well just sleep on the floor. Right? So now, if you're leaving somewhere, you're gonna miss the event that you're going to, right? That stinks. If you just want to go back home, right, then you maybe miss your first day at work and your boss is gonna be upset. That's a pretty stressful time that we've all had. And everyone is very quick to tell their harrowing airport story. Now, imagine you're an Afghan who helped the Americans for the past 20 years, and you're ready to leave the country because you know that it's gonna fall to the Taliban. You got your papers in order, you're ready to go, you're ready to leave, you go to the airport. On the way, remember our government said, 90 days, maybe, 90 days it may fall, which is still weird, but it took 3, right? So on the way to the airport, Kabul falls to the Taliban. They're not letting anyone leave. You're at the airport, you got your paperwork, you got your visa, you got your ticket. The plane's right there, but you're not getting on it. No one's getting on it. There's no food vouchers from the airline. And instead of just facing an uncomfortable sleep on the floor, you're now going to die. We've all had bad airplane experiences, but we've never had one where if you don't get on that next plane, you die. We've all had the airport experience where you're like, it's so miserable, like, oh, are you kidding me? We've never had an airport experience where if you don't get on that plane, you're dead. You can't go back home. There is no home. You're dead. If your family wasn't with you at that very moment, they're back home, they're dead. Everyone's dead. There's people on the streets dead, dragged from their homes, shot in the head, hanged from 20-foot poles. There's people walking around. Like I've seen these videos of people hanged, right? People hanged, they build these towers with these poles. And there's people just hanged, and there's just people milling about. Just people walking around. Everyone's acting like this is way too normal. Everyone's very desensitized to bodies hanging over the street. So would you cling to the side of an airplane? Sure. What else you got? Now, is it our role to save the world and rescue everyone who's in a difficult time? No, it's not. But when you make promises to people, you follow through. You get the people out who helped us. How shameful that we didn't. Do not let Biden or anyone give you the false choice of saying that we either needed to stay there for 20 more years or leave like this. Right? That was one of Biden's whole things yesterday. It was like, it was my decision. We had to get out of there. We had to follow through on the promises to get out of there. It's like, yeah, great, super. I'm with you on that. Not like this. At the very least, you saved the people who saved us when we were there. And it's not like we didn't know this was a problem. It's not like evacuating people. It's not like we didn't know. Last number I heard, there's 80,000 visas in process. Come on. It's like, I forget how the math adds up. It's like 23,000 primaries and then 53,000 family members. That's just sitting in the bureaucracy right now. Come on. LA Times a month ago, a month and a half. This is July 21st is this article, right? Talking about how we're doing a terrible job getting our Afghan translators out. You maybe heard this story about a month or two ago. So we knew. We knew this was a problem. They never fixed it. This is Brian Williams on MSNBC. Brian Williams calling Biden's speech, just perfect in every single way. And he brought in this Afghan vet, Matt Zeller, who also runs an organization that helps Afghan interpreters come to America. He helps them with their visas. He meets them at the airport, gives them a big American flag and says, welcome to your new home, welcome to your new country. It's a beautiful thing. And it's because his life was saved by one of these Afghan soldiers, Afghan translators. His life was saved. The story, or he tells the story in a different moment of a translator who killed some Taliban members. Then the Taliban, of course, put a bounty on his family's head. And it took him 5 years to get safely to America. 5 years to go through the process. Anyway, here's Brian Williams talking to this guy about the Biden's just amazing speech.
I'm curious to hear your reaction of this consequential speech by the American president. Didn't run from it. He owned it. He owned his decision. He owned the fact that, as he put it, the buck stops with him.
I hope he gets to own their deaths, too. I feel like I watched a different speech than the rest of you guys. I was appalled. There was such a profound, bold-faced lie in that speech. The idea that we planned for every contingency. I have been personally trying to tell this administration since it took office. I've been trying to tell our government for years that this was coming. We sent them plan after plan on how to evacuate these people. Nobody listened to us. They didn't plan for the evacuation of our Afghan wartime allies. They're trying to conduct it now at the 11th hour. The thing that they were most concerned about was the optics of a chaotic evacuation. Well, they got exactly what they were most concerned of by failing to do what was right when we could have done it. We had all the people and equipment in place to be able to save these people months ago, and we did nothing. I'm appalled that he thinks we only need to take 2,000 people. There's 86,000 people who are currently left behind in Afghanistan alone. We've identified all of them for the government. I have no idea why he claims that people don't want to leave Afghanistan. I have a list of 14,000 names right now of people who want to get out of Afghanistan. And the idea that the Afghan military should be blamed for this, do you know how many casualties the Afghan military took in an average year? More than the United States did in 20. When you're not getting paid on a regular basis, when you're not getting fuel, when no one is supplying you with ammunition, and yet you're still showing up to the fight, how dare us for having to blame these people for not having the audacity to be able to survive a Taliban onslaught? No. What we need to be doing right now, and what I am appalled that the president didn't say, was we need to be talking
about getting him out is what the rest of that sentence. So that's my second point. Well, first is, again, this wouldn't have happened under Trump, and everyone knows it. Second, we knew this was an issue, getting our allies out, and we knew it was an issue, and Biden failed. Now, listen, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. I get it. But there had to have been a way to get these Afghans out who helped us. And then we can leave on our own terms. This is Biden just 5 weeks ago. Just 5 weeks ago.
Will not conduct a hasty rush to the exit. We'll do it responsibly, deliberately, and safely.
It wasn't responsible, it wasn't deliberate, and it's not safe. That was just Biden 5 weeks ago. Bagram Air Base, it's our biggest air base in Afghanistan. The Taliban took it. What do you mean? What do you mean the Taliban took the biggest air base? Not only that, there's a prison, the Parwan detention facility. There's 5,000 Taliban fighters. inside that, well, they were inside that prison. They're now all out. Let me end this with, this is a clip from The Economist, or a quote from The Economist. The Economist is not a right-wing organization. The abandonment of Afghanistan to Taliban rule after 20 years of American commitment mocks Joe Biden's claim that America is back. Joe Biden may have more foreign policy experience than any president in the last 30 years, but he's haunted by the brutal assessment of Robert Gates. That was the defense secretary of Obama, and of course, when Joe Biden was vice president. By the way, the last 20 years in Afghanistan, Biden was VP during 8 of those. Mr. Gates called, in Writing in Duty, his memoir, Robert Gates, he said, "I think Joe Biden's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades." Add it to the list. But Trump's tweets were so mean. Good decision, America. Coming up next, there's a ton of different angles to this, obviously, and we're going to talk about it for a long time coming because it deserves it. But one angle I don't hear anyone really talking about is China, and how China benefits from this, and how China's licking their chops, and China's thrilled, and what this means for the next war that we will be faced with, whether we fight or not. And that is with China and in Taiwan in particular. And there's a ton to know about China. We'll do a little geography lesson coming up next as well. First, I want to give you a friendly reminder to sign up for our newsletter. It's totally free. It's called the Up First newsletter on the first meaning the First Amendment. So this is where you get your news first, get it framed properly, see what's important, find out what's going on, and then you can embark upon the rest of your day. And of course, stick with us. But it's a wonderful newsletter and totally free. TheFirstTV.com. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, you know that if the Republicans had a backbone, they would impeach the president today for what he did in Afghanistan. They would impeach him right away. You know the Democrats would. Like, imagine if Trump did this, and as we talked about in the last segment, this never would have happened under Trump, and everyone knows it. But if he did, the left would freak out. I forget what they even impeached him over the last 2 times. But that's how stupid this was. Would definitely, like, they would flip if this happened. They would be questioning his mental clarity. They would be saying he's a Russian stooge. Oh, this is what the Russians wanted. He's doing the Russians' bidding. They would freak out. There'd be congressional, and there wouldn't even be congressional hearings. They would vote on this yesterday to impeach President Trump. And what are our Republicans going to do? What are the Republicans going to do now? Nothing. Nothing. All right. In this segment, I want to talk about China. I feel like this is an angle that a lot of people haven't talked about. So hopefully at the end of this, it can at least be one other thing that you're considering as you're taking in a lot of other Afghanistan news. Right? So, how to start? Our leadership here, Biden, right? They're so worthless. They've been telling the world community to not recognize the Taliban as the official government of Afghanistan. Okay? So, hey, everyone around the world, don't recognize the Taliban. So what does China come in? What does China do? Well, China comes in and does exactly that. They will be the first country to officially recognize the Taliban. Here's a picture of the Taliban visiting China recently. Washington Examiner. China's been laying the groundwork to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, flying in the face of the U.S. warning the group about isolation from the international community. Ooh, Taliban, you better not take power over Afghanistan, otherwise you'll be isolated from the world community. The Chinese government held high-level meetings with Taliban leaders late last month, and Chinese officials and state-run media outlets signaled a growing acceptance to the Taliban's takeover. Yeah, of course. And the best we can do are issue very, very strongly worded statements. Like, so strongly, like these aren't just statements, and they're not just worded statements. They are strongly worded statements. Are you ready? Can I give you one of them? Hey, if there's any kids listening right now, you may want them to have them leave the room for a minute. This is so strongly worded, it may just like break their brain. All right, this is our ambassador to Afghanistan. Are you ready for this? How strongly worded? Attempts to monopolize power through violence, fear, and war, this is to the Taliban, will only lead to international isolation. Wow. Wow, that was strongly worded. And they are shaking in their boots. And now that the rest of the world is dependent on China, as we've talked about many times before on this show, China's going to be calling in their favors. And this is how it works. They say, hey, Greece, about that port we built you that your country's now dependent on? Yeah, great port, isn't it? How about you guys recognize the Taliban? Hey, countries in Africa, you like all those 5G towers that we built you? You know how you get your internet? That's great. They're wonderful. Really nice. Glad we did that for you. So about the Taliban, you want to go ahead and recognize them? That's how that works. When everything goes through China, they have the leverage to control the world. And we, America, we are weaker and weaker and more pathetic every day. And now China is going to go in. All right, so that's point number one, right? So point number one is Taliban will be the officially recognized country, ruler of Afghanistan by many different countries. And you can tell which countries are going to be ruled by China, right? Or are dependent on China based on who recognizes the Taliban. Okay, point one. Second point, China is going to take over Afghanistan. Afghanistan is going to become a Chinese colony. And you're saying, oh, well, they're going to make the same mistake we made and the Soviets made. No. They're not going to do it the way we tried. They're going to do it their way. They're going to do it the Chinese way with a ton of investment. And they're going to say the same thing they always do. They say, hey, how about we build you a 5G network, Afghanistan? How about we build you these trains, these highways, these power plants? How about we help you develop that copper mine? Aren't we just so wonderful and giving? And then once they do that, they own them. In Afghanistan, the Afghan people are dependent on them. This is what they do. This is their entire Belt and Road Initiative. This is their plan to take over the world. And just China, like Afghanistan, piece of cake now. Let's do a quick geography awareness lesson. Like we have no idea where countries are and how big they are and what blah, blah. Afghanistan's about the size of maybe like a third of the country, landmass wise, right? If you put it over America, it'd be like a third of our country. But here's a map of that region, right? So China and Afghanistan are touching sort of. So China's the big yellow country there. Afghanistan is to the left of it. You can see it's the blue country. And they're not next to, I don't know how you describe it, right? Like, they're like they're next-ish to each other, but they're connected by this little valley. If you zoom in, you kind of just see there's like a blue little line that connects Afghanistan and China. That's called the Wakhan Corridor. Wakhan, the Wakhan Corridor. This is where Afghanistan and China share a border. The reason that awkward border exists is because the Russians and the British decided to put it there. This was like 1890s or something like that. So it's a 9-mile wide stretch of land. It's 47 miles long. And at the end, it opens up a little bit. And it's a 47-mile long border between Afghanistan and China. Guys, can you pop that up one more time? Sorry. The whole region underneath this Wakhan corridor is Kashmir. Kashmir is a disputed area. No one really knows who controls it. India claims it. Pakistan claims it. China claims it. So, that's enough of the map. We can't begin to go over all the history of that area and all the internal disputes and all that stuff between the different tribes that exist there, right? The point is, China wants it. Their Silk and Road Initiative, their Belt and Road Initiative, right, goes right through it. And there is a ton of investment in Afghanistan that they are going to gobble up shamelessly. Copper, gold, lithium. The largest untapped copper mine in the world is right outside Kabul. And then China's going to do something else that we never did and that the Soviets didn't do. They're going to send a bunch of Chinese people into Afghanistan. This is how they colonize. When they colonize an African city, they send a bunch of Chinese people there. When they colonized the towns in northern Italy, they sent a bunch of Chinese people there. This is how the Wuhan flu spread, COVID spread from Wuhan to northern Italy first, because Chinese companies gobbled up, took over, literally bought all the northern garment factories in northern Italy and sent a bunch of Chinese people there. This is what they're going to do in Afghanistan. This is how they colonize. Machiavelli, in The Prince, written in 1532 or something like 500 years ago, he said, when you take over a foreign country that has different language, different culture, different customs, the only way you're going to be able to keep it under control is if you send your people to live there. We didn't do that. Who wants to live in Afghanistan? China will. The Chinese already have spying operations on that part of that we just showed you, the Wakhan Pass, to prevent the Uyghurs from escaping through that area. So they're already deeply embedded there. And it's just ripe for the Chinese now to take over entirely, furthering their investment and domination over Central Asia, which is an obvious step in their obvious goal to be the world superpower and bring in complete world domination. And we are doing them no favor, or I should say, we are doing them great favor with our failures. This is a communist newspaper. It's called the Global Times. You wouldn't know it was a communist paper unless you knew it was a communist. It's like a Chinese communist paper. They said, from what happened in Afghanistan, those in Taiwan, which China believes is theirs, those in Taiwan should perceive that once a war breaks out, the island's defense will collapse in hours and the U.S. military won't come to help. As a result, the DPP will quickly surrender. DPP is like one of the political parties in Taiwan that believes in independence from China. So there they are. They're saying, oh, we're going to take over Taiwan now. And America's not going to save you. America won't protect you. America won't rescue you. You're ours now. And they're not wrong. I wonder when America's ever been as weak as we are right now. This is the cartoon that they put in with their editorial. America leading the Taiwan officials down the hole. Last point, and then we'll get to some guests. Last point on China. It's very similar to how we thought that if we started trading with China, that China would become more like us. I fell for that as well. If we trade more with China, China will become more like us. But instead, we become more like China, as we've outlined many, many times. Very similar thing happened in Afghanistan. We wanted them to become more like us. We wanted them to become a democracy. But instead, we became more like them. Slater, what do you mean? This is from the New Lines Institute. And there's many, many examples of this. They wrote a little article about bacha bazi. Bacha bazi means boy play in Arabic. Actually, you guys can just put it up. You can read it if you want. So in Afghanistan, the women can't dance. So they would dress up, Afghans will dress up little boys as women, as girls, and then have sex with them. Sometimes they're called chai boys. They would serve them tea, right? And they were sex slaves. We talked about this many years ago on my radio show, young boys used as sex slaves. But here's the key. That's not just part of Afghan culture. That would happen on American military bases. There's many stories of Americans who would witness little boys being raped by the Afghan security forces, by people in the Afghan military. And the Americans would beat them up, right? They'd beat up. Every masculine part inside of them would be so outraged that they would beat up this Afghan. And then the American would get in trouble. New York Times, 2015, wrote an article, U.S. soldiers told to ignore sexual abuse of boys by Afghan allies. The Americans would get in trouble. They were told it's part of their culture. This is from a Marine who says he worked with counter-intel Marines, right? These guys who would spy with the CIA. Their INDOC test, it's like the process of getting it. The INDOC test became famous because they made sure that you're okay with pedophilia as a cultural thing. Keith Kellogg yesterday said that we lost our way in Afghanistan 18 years ago when we decided to start nation building. And that's no doubt when we lost our mission. But we really lost our way when we started to allow stuff like this. That's when we lost who we are as a people. when we made it official policy to turn the other way and allow child rape on our military bases. So just like China hasn't become more like us, we become more like China. It's a big problem when Afghanistan doesn't become more like us, we become more like Afghanistan, or at least we allow it on our military bases. We did. Maybe that should have been a sign that we weren't moving in the right direction. True story. Mike Slater, we'll get an update next, a report next on what's going on the ground today in Afghanistan. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Obviously, to get the latest on the ground, we're going to go to our friend Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk. Lisa, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you, Mike?
Good to talk to you. What have you heard the latest on the ground today when it comes to the people of Afghanistan?
Yeah, things are not looking good. Obviously, it's going to be an hour-by-hour situation. I just heard that flights opened back up, but the Taliban is surrounding the airport in Kabul. That's going to keep changing. Obviously, we're keeping our eyes on the macro here. What's going to happen in the long run? We're going to have not just a headquarters, but we're going to have an actual country run by a terror organization that has now inherited weapons, an army, a whole population of people that it will force to fold under its flag. So there are a lot of victims here. There are a lot of people that we're thinking of here. And the biggest question we have is, how did this happen so quickly? How did 20 years of hard work and the main goal really get so diminished so quickly within hours? And that's what we're looking at here in Afghanistan.
I got a bunch of questions for you. I hope you can clear up. I've heard some people criticize Trump's plan or Trump's peace deal that he had as setting the stage for the failure that we've seen right now. What do you know about what Trump set in motion?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here with what happened with Trump. First and foremost, we would say, listen, if the Trump foreign policy was so bad, the Biden administration didn't need to follow it. Look at how many policies they did a 180 on completely. They could have thrown that out also, like everything else that they threw out. So that's first of all in this blame game. Secondly, let's talk specifically about what Trump was trying to do. Trump did try to sit down and negotiate with the Taliban. I didn't agree with it at the time because I have been studying counterterrorism for a very long time, and you know that you cannot reform or change a terrorist. You can't do it with the Taliban, you can't do it with ISIS, you can't do it with the Iranian regime. You just cannot change them. What he was hoping to do and what he thought to himself, his calculation was that, look, the Taliban's not going anywhere. They will not leave Afghanistan. And if we want to leave Afghanistan, what we can maybe do is work alongside them. Let's strike a deal with them. Let's negotiate with them so that if they're going to be there, at least they can behave or they can, help in the nation building, or at least help because they are well funded in building schools and infrastructure and keeping the people safe. But obviously that backfired. Trump was still looking to have a May withdrawal. That's a fact. But he was also looking to strike a deal. We don't know what would have happened if he wasn't able to strike a deal. Think about how many ceasefires the Taliban had signed on to and broke. So Trump was well aware of the fact that they couldn't keep their half of the deal. And look at how many other items we saw where Trump approached or initiated a deal, but when he saw that the partner just wasn't there, he left the negotiating table. We saw this with North Korea, we saw this with Iran, we saw this in many other cases, China being another example, and maybe he would have done the same thing with Afghanistan. So I think, looking back and saying, well, Trump, set up this deal, I think there's a lot more to it.
At least a deal could have been, hey, we're leaving, let's let all the Afghans who have helped us out. Right? Like, we're going to get all of our guys out. You can't take over until we get the 83 visas in process out of there safely. We could have at least done something like that. Can you think of anything else that we could have done that wouldn't have been so embarrassing and humiliating as what we're seeing now?
Absolutely. Look, the fact that you still didn't get those Americans out, what we saw on the tarmac, that footage is just an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to American policy. It wasn't well thought out. It was hectic. It was chaotic, and it obviously put American lives in danger. Not to mention, all these Afghans who helped the American people as well. What we could have done is fortified these assets that we have there. We don't, tend to save the date to our enemies and say, we're going to empty out this base first, so you guys can go and raid that base, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. That's exactly what the Taliban was hoping that we would do, and they followed our footsteps, and that's how we got into this mess to begin with. We could have fortified our embassy. We could have helped the translators. We could have helped the researchers and all the other personnel. These are the things that have to take place before 20 years of, our presence there is withdrawn overnight.
Amazing. What's your assessment, Lisa, on the Afghan military? I keep going back and forth, and I hear compelling cases on both sides that, first of all, criticizing them as Biden did. Actually, guys, do we have that clip of Biden doing that yesterday, criticizing the Afghans?
We plan for every contingency, but I always promise the American people that I will be straight with you. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed.
It's like one of about 5 or 6 times when he blamed the Afghans for not fighting. So I hear that they just gave up whatever. But then I also hear the fact that it was like 53 or 56,000 Afghans have died in the last 7 years in the Afghan military fighting against the Taliban. More have died this year. More Afghans have died this year than Americans have died in 20 years. So how do you find that nuance here of, geez, they gave up, guys, you didn't fight for your country, come on, versus, oh no, they were fighting for their country, they just lost. How do you see it?
Yeah, look, you think back to just logic, right? And you think, what leader wants to give up his country and flee like a coward? Nobody wants to do that. And if the Afghan president and the military and everyone else believed that they had a chance against the Taliban, I don't think they would have fled. I think they would have fought. You have to remember also, in the past 20 years, it's not as though the Afghans were waiting outside Afghanistan and now they just poured in. They've been this hovering force. They have, obviously had hundreds and hundreds of suicide bombings. They have gone after schools and children and women and, pizza shops and ice cream shops and mosques and weddings. So the Afghan people, the military, the president, they know what threat they're up against. And that's they knew that they're not capable of fighting the Taliban when they were on this march to conquer the entire country. The second thing I want to point to is that the American strategy is completely flawed from the get-go. What do I mean by that? But after 9/11, we decided to go into Afghanistan to get rid of this threat, this Taliban threat that launched the 9/11 attacks. And we did a good job of diminishing that terrorist threat. But what we did was we stayed in order to build their military, in order to build their nation. And that was not part of the job. The job was to eliminate an ideology, not a military. And we didn't do that. And in the last 20 years, we kept maybe their presence limited, or we kept their growth limited, but we never got rid of that ideology. And now what they're able to do is bounce right back. They can recruit more jihadis. They already let out thousands of Al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters from the US-based prison. Those are all jihadi fighters. So, it's all flushed down the toilet, for lack of a better term, without any thought as to what are we there for? We took our eyes off of the main goal, which again is to fight this awful ideology which spreads so quickly.
Hard to see how this could have gone worse. And Biden yesterday said, the Afghan military, they were the most armed military of almost any in the whole world. And now the Taliban is one of the most armed militaries in the entire world. To your point. Lisa Daftari, the Foreign Desk. Follow her on Twitter and everywhere else. foreigndesknews.com. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Have a wonderful day. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, switching gears away from Afghanistan for just a moment. Surely we will be right back to it, and certainly all day tomorrow. But we're starting to see some dominoes, hopefully, fall here in America. We saw Cuomo resign, governor of New York. September 14th is the day that hopefully we recall Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And the next that I'd love to see fall is the governor of Michigan. Those have probably been the three most oppressive governors throughout COVID in the entire country. One of the people who's looking to replace Governor Whitmer in Michigan is Tudor Dixon. Tudor, how are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
It is great to talk to you. We could spend a lot of time going through all the worst things that Gretchen Whitmer has done. But she's gotten this crazy pass on her own, nursing home scandal, just like Cuomo did. What did she do?
Yeah, she put COVID positive patients into nursing homes. She took COVID positive patients from other hospitals, put them into nursing homes. We have an extraordinary number of nursing home deaths. 1/3 of our deaths that were recorded from nursing homes, 1/3 of our COVID deaths are from nursing homes. But the question is, how many really are there? Because the Director of Health and Human Services openly admits, Elizabeth Hertel came out and said, it could be twice as many deaths. We don't know. We weren't keeping that close of count. Now think about this. Not keeping that close of count on nursing home deaths, but she's arresting restaurant owners. She's citing barbers. She's taking everything to a height of personal, going after people. She's going after people on a personal level in a way no other governor did. But this happened in Michigan while she wasn't protecting our most vulnerable.
Yeah, what is it about her? Like, I don't know her that much. Like, what's her mindset that she went harder than almost any other governor, as you said, personally on people? What's her deal?
Well, we think that she is the governor of big government because she wants to have total control and she clearly doesn't love small business. She's had the opportunity to help small business with tax relief. She's had the opportunity to provide PPE, personal protective equipment, to small business. And look, we are one of the few states that continues to allow this federal unemployment, and it's crushing small business. So she wants government to rule. She wants government making decisions. She's even said multiple times she wants the mask mandates back in schools, even though parents have said we want to make that decision on our own. She says she's watching schools very closely this year, and I'm here to say she's watching Joe Biden very closely to see if he comes out and says this, because as soon as the federal government says, hey, let's go on mandates, Gretchen Whitmer will be right behind them.
Yep, and we have them here in California, the mask mandates in schools, and it's like the three of these people are in a contest to see who can be furthest on the left and craziest when it comes to COVID. And her hypocrisy is right up there with the worst as well, going to Florida when she told no one else to. And didn't her aide or her chief of staff or something went to Florida too?
Yes, went to Florida, even though her son had tested positive for COVID and she wasn't fully vaccinated, went to Florida and then posted pictures on Facebook and even admitted she was there while her son was homesick with COVID. The hypocrisy of the Whitmer administration has been outrageous, and parents are concerned. Listen, they're concerned about what you said about Gavin Newsom and the mask mandates, because if mask mandates come to Michigan for schools again, the concern is that will go to the next step, that we'll have vaccine mandates, and we don't have approval for children under 12 yet, but we're hearing that could happen in the fall. Parents don't want that, because mandates turn into all of a sudden you have vaccine clinics inside of your school and your kid comes home with a sticker that says, hey, Mom, I got the vaccine today. No way. Where does it end?
Yeah, it's got to stop now. No, you got to take a stand on the mask mandates now, Michigan. We got about 45 seconds. Did you get kicked off Twitter for something or kicked off social media?
We had a picture of me with President Trump on Facebook, and so we had the threat of getting kicked off of social media, getting kicked off of Facebook, because you can't have any pictures with the former president, you can't have any acknowledgement of the former president. Even though look at what this current president is doing, as we are currently the embarrassment of the world. I was telling a friend this morning that I'm watching news networks on overseas, and they're saying, hey, listen, we're waiting. The world is waiting for America to respond, and America has suddenly gone dark. This is an embarrassment.
Yep. Well, they're worried about masks instead. Tudor Dixon running for governor of Michigan against the terrible Gretchen Whitmer. How can people support you, Ms. Dixon?
Yes, please go to tudordixon.com. That's TUDORDIXON.com. We'd love your support.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
We have this the opening. This is that election's next November. The opening for all these wins is so massive. Congressional, governor, school board, do not miss the opportunities. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow.